choose it.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. It is 7 o'clock. I'll ask everybody to rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Okay, so I will look for a motion to waive the reading of the warrant articles.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Unanimous. I'd like to note that Article 21 has been withdrawn, and a petitioner for Article 20 is in the room, so I'd like to have a motion to go out of order and take Article 20
So
first.
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. All opposed? Unanimous. Okay, let's start with Article 12. Oh, and I wanted to note, if anybody has any questions or whatnot, come up to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll take your questions. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Michael Saccone, and I'm here in reference to Article 20. When we prepared Article 20, when my attorney put the use table together, they checked off too many boxes. It was our intent in Article 20 to only ask the town to allow the lawful use with planning board approval of a new or existing building as assisted living facility or a special care residence in heavy industrial only. So in other words, I'm not asking to have it allowed with planning board approval in R40, in commercial, in MN designation, OR, or WNB. So that is my amendment. We're not looking for across all zoning districts, only in heavy industrial zoning districts.
Have you put that in writing, or do you have an amendment coming forward for that?
We would be happy to supply whatever was necessary.
I would definitely appreciate that.
Put it in writing?
Put it in writing.
Okay,
Thank you.
happy to do that. Would there be any other requirements to make sure that we...
No, but I know that I personally would feel much more comfortable knowing that the R40 was taken out, and the department, the ones that you signified were not what your intention was, except for the high HI?
Correct.
Then
That is
just to leave
exactly
HI with the planning board, and
Planning
the rest
board
of them
approval.
should be all no.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the petitioner. Special care residence, what's included in that?
CTE, with the thought process on that was specifically for CTE. As that it's becoming bigger, the people that are have come down with CTE need a place to rehab and to assimilate back into society. So it'd be short-term residents. Mostly that's athletes and younger people. It's starting to become more prevalent. That's what that designation is for. So it'd be memory care, dementia, and CTE.
Excuse me, can you speak up? You started great, but now you're fading.
Absolutely.
Maybe just move the mic a little closer there.
Did you get the answer to that question, sir?
No, I didn't.
I was asked, what the special care residence designation is for, and it'd be for the treatment of traumatic brain injury from concussion. It's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is known as CTE, and it's currently, most commonly athletes from many concussions. And there are really no facilities that specialize in the treatment of CTE or that have space designated to treat people who have CTE.
So could you repeat what the change would be again?
The change in my
amendment?
my request.
Yeah.
I am not requesting it in R40. I am not requesting it in commercial zone property.
And this
property.
is, sorry, this is just the special care residence part?
Both assisted
both,
living
okay.
and special care.
So not
My
the-
request is for HI only.
Okay, so scratch out all the others.
Scratch out all the others, that is
Gotcha.
correct, and I
Okay.
apologize, that was overlooked by myself in the submission. It was never the intent to have anything but HI zoning.
HI and HI1?
Yes,
Okay.
Oh, so it's two,
yes,
okay. And then you're going to take out the other ones we discussed, plus the OR and the W and B.
yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Has the planning board voted on this?
They have not.
Okay.
Have not even made a presentation to the planning board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. You have not made a presentation?
We have not.
May I ask why? I'm just not sure. Wouldn't it be going to planning board before Board of Selectmen, Finance, and then the town?
It was my understanding that there was no specific zone in the town of Tewksbury to put a facility like this. So from our point of view, the first step was to create a place to put it before we can even ask for permission to do the project. The way the current zoning bylaws are written, they were amended, I think it was 2010, this designation was eliminated from the zoning bylaws. And I don't know all the specifics on that, but I do know that currently today, if I took out the zoning book, there is no place for me to ask to build this facility.
Okay.
That's why I was under the impression that we have to start here.
I understand what you're saying. I do.
So Richard, the planning board wouldn't weigh in on this?
I'm just pulling their recommendations up now. I think they did weigh in on it, and I believe they approved it as it was originally written. They have not discussed the amendment.
Okay.
So they did have a hearing on the zoning, but
Okay,
still
that's
a
good.
confusion
That's
on
good to know.
what's being discussed. So the planning board had a properly posted hearing on the zoning articles. This article went in front of them, and they approved it as it was written in the warrant.
They didn't catch those?
I'm not sure what the discussion was.
Okay.
I'm not sure either. I apologize for the wrong answer. I didn't know that they had gone through that process.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else from the committee have any questions?
Just a point of information, I'd like to hear from a resident.
Yeah, I was going
Okay.
to do that next.
I have other questions, but I'd rather hear from the resident first because he
Okay,
may
that's
he
fine.
may have the same
Mr.
question.
Chairman, through you, Joe Gill, 12 Ellington Road. Is there a site specific on this particular item?
Yes,
What is it?
East Street.
Where? Big road.
Formerly known as 1023, 1029 East Street. As you come up to the Gateway Sitco, it's on the right-hand side, approximately 600 feet before you get to the gateway.
Is this going to be part of the amendment we're doing at the town meeting? The location, so that people know what they're dealing with?
When we get to town meeting, I'll absolutely make known what the location is, yes.
Okay,
But I mean, I can't ask for that specific location because spot zoning is not allowed.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I may have misunderstood something.
A name and address for the record?
Jay
please.
Kelly, 22 Karen Lee Lane.
Thank you.
I thought I heard Mr. Saccone, did I pronounce that?
Saccone.
Saccone.
Yes.
Okay, I was close. Thank you.
Yes.
I thought I heard him say he had not made a presentation to the planning board, and they had not made a recommendation. And then I thought I heard the town clerk say the opposite.
I believe there was no presentation, but the planning board reviewed the warrant articles.
That's correct.
And they made a recommendation.
And they approved it.
Do you happen to know why they made a recommendation without a presentation?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I-
Mr. Cook?
Is this the same property that was tried to be zoned for a car wash, et cetera, a year or so ago?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not
Retail
aware of
space?
that.
I'm sorry?
I'm not aware of that. I do not think it is.
So it doesn't abut Industrial Way?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Tom, the car wash was on 133 near the KinderCare and all that area.
No, but they were trying to, a year ago, they were trying to
Yep.
rezone right across from the fire station on North Street.
Oh, really? I didn't know that either.
There were formerly 2 residences there, sir.
Right.
They were removed, and then I think one of the projects that was considered for that, not by myself, by others, was,
Were those residents torn down yet?
yes, they were.
Okay.
It was self-storage.
Okay.
Self-storage is what was considered
Exactly.
prior to me getting involved.
Right. So it's in that general area there?
Yes, it is. 1023, 1029 East Street are the former addresses of the residential homes.
And there's no purchase or sale agreement in place for the abutting property?
There is not.
Okay. My last question, Mr. Chairman, through you, is could you just give me a brief explanation of CMR Code of Massachusetts Regulation 651, Section 12? Just a brief explanation, because it's listed in the summary, but I don't have any knowledge of what that consists of.
You mean the special care residence?
Yes,
The special care residence is,
as it's defined in the Code of Massachusetts
I
Regulation.
can't give you word for word what it's designed for, but
Paraphrase it.
it's for injuries and illnesses such as CTE. They're not as widespread as dementia. They're not as widespread as Alzheimer's. And it's basically just to allow a place to be established for treatment and rehab, because it's not really hospital-type treatment. It's more CTE injuries align more with dementia,
Right.
where they need to be watched on a regular basis. They need to be fed. They need to have physical therapy. They need to have speech therapy. So it's a little bit more intense than dementia and Alzheimer's, but in the same realm. Still not quite as intense as an intensive care unit. They're not
Acute
Yes,
intensive
acute.
care,
Thank you.
Thank you. The question I have is, under this table that's provided in the article,
Yes.
would there be a special permit required? Do you know of?
No, it would be with planning board approval.
Just planning board?
Just
approval, no
planning board
special-
approval.
Okay.
Yes, planning board approval.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I do have another question.
Sure.
In regards to I think it's really great to bring in that type of a facility into Tewksbury, but in regards to emergency care infrastructure, would you have your own ambulances there, or would the client already have their own ambulances there? Excuse me, or would they rely on the town to assist in that part of the infrastructure?
What's transpired in that industry now is that there would be an ambulance on the facility. But what happens now is the towns are reimbursed. Cities and towns are reimbursed. If they get a call to the residents, they're reimbursed by the insurance company. And the facility sits in the middle of that. So it will not be a strain. It may be a strain on number of calls per day. I'm sure that there
Right.
will be calls added, not per day, but per week.
Right.
And, but the town of Tewksbury will be reimbursed for any services that they provide. And of course, the upside is that there are no children, no schooling, very, very little traffic.
Yep.
There are a lot of benefits. Aside from the fact that it's helping people in the community, and the demographics show that in the next 15 years, if we increased the number of beds available by 150%, it wouldn't be enough. We're at the beginning of a curve. The demographics show. I would be happy to make that information available to anyone that would like to see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering the question.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
Typically, we defer to the planning board, yes?
Unless there is a significant financial impact, which I'm not really sure that I see here, I would motion to defer to the planning board.
Okay, we have a motion to defer to the planning board,
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. All right, back to number 1, I guess.
You all set?
All set.
Okay. Can you hear me in the audience? Okay. So Article 1 is a raise and appropriate article in the sum of $4,825,827.36. And the funds are needed to pay the debt service for the elementary school. This is exempt debt that was voted on at the April local election. The bonds were authorized by town meeting in May. We borrowed the funds in June. We had not put the funds in the budget because we weren't sure what the debt service would be. So this article simply raises the principal and interest in that amount to be placed in the FY 2020 budget.
Are there any questions from the public?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Yep, please hold that thought.
I just have Kevin Donnelly, 8 Westland Drive. I just have an information question on the $2.1 million of interest. That just surprised me, there's so much interest coming up so fast. That's like about $30 million of debt. Could you comment on that? I mean, I don't know. It just seemed an awful large number.
I'm not sure what the question is, how much debt, how much interest there is in the entire...
Why is there $2 million of interest in this year?
It's a $60 million bond. It's
Yeah, but you'd have to borrow $30 million from March, June to June for it to come to $2 million.
No,
It seems like a huge number for right off the bat. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I know it's $60 million.
It's a $60 million bond. It's the first, usually in a bond issue, you would pay just interest in the first year. This is 2 interest payments in 1 year. So
Yeah,
it's...
But you wouldn't borrow the whole $60 million at once, would you? Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe
We borrowed
that's the
$60 million all at once.
answer. You have?
We had,
Okay,
yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
I thought you borrowed it in pieces. Okay.
No, we wanted to take advantage of what we felt would be good interest rates. The future was too uncertain, so...
Okay, thank you.
And we did get a good interest rate. It was around 2.4%.
Nice. Any questions from the committee? I would like to note that we've had a chance to review these articles, so there may not be many questions from the committee. Anyway, Donna, were you about to say something?
A motion to accept this article?
I'll second.
A motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Article 2.
Article 2 is a raise and appropriate article in the amount of $971.80 for outstanding bills from the previous fiscal year. We have 3 unpaid bills that came in after the 2019 books were closed in mid to late July. One is for Comcast internet service, $481.80. The other is Badger Meter, which is our the maintenance of our software, and then Lowell General for $100, which is a employee medical exam.
Any questions from the public? From the committee? Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Any opposed? All right, number 3.
Number 3 is a transfer from free cash in the amount of $150,000 to be expended for future compensated absence liabilities, which are sick leave buyback and vacation accrual buybacks when employees retire. We have 2 retirements this year from police and fire that need to be, the sick leave needs to be funded. We also have some retirements coming up over the next couple of years, and I'm trying to start building somewhat of a bank. We appropriated money last October, and it's just preparing for those large sick leave buybacks and vacation accrual buybacks. So this just sets that money aside to pay for at least the 2 that we have this year. And Mr. Chairman, just briefly, this year's free cash amount that was certified July 1, 2019 In the draft handout that you have in the back, there are financial breakdowns, but we have certified $4,247,154. In the handout, it shows the uses of the free cash. We'll use it all at this town meeting, most of it going into the stabilization fund. But free cash essentially is the surplus that we had at the end of the fiscal year for revenues, actual revenue coming in higher than we projected. Turnbacks, budgetary turnbacks from the town and school made up free cash, and just other revenue, state aid, and real estate, and personal property that came in higher than projected. Again, a little over 4.2 million certified in free cash as of July 1.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the public on Article 3? No? Okay. Any from the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Through you again. Mr. Town Manager Richard, you mentioned 2 retirements this year. The $150,000 that's within this article, is that to be expended?
It's going to be expended on, not all of it, but two.
What
About
would be that?
$100,000 will be expended probably on 2 of them.
How much?
About $100,000.
About $100,000.
Yeah, and then the remainder will stay there. We have other retirements coming up over the next couple of fiscal years I want to start preparing for.
Could you tell us what departments the retirements are in?
The police and fire.
Both police?
1 police, 1 fire.
1 police, 1 fire. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Joe Gill, 12 Ellington Road. Mr. Chairman, in the 3 decades that I've been involved in doing the budgets for this town, in one way or the other, these monies used to be included in each individual budget. If we had a police retirement, they knew the year they were making out the budget that they put it in the budget. What has changed that we don't do this anymore?
One of the retirements this year was a retirement we didn't anticipate was going to happen this year because it was a disability retirement that took place. The other is going to be later in the fiscal year, and we planned on addressing it at October town meeting. These are large dollar amounts that we just haven't funded within the budget. We either set aside free cash when we have had an opportunity to fund within the budget. We have, but the one, they're just large amounts of money. Just no other reason other than that.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Sure.
Is that to say that from now on, these monies will not be in the individual budgets?
No, we've done a combination of both. In the past, if you look in previous years' budgets, again, not all of them, they have been included. Then there were years when we couldn't do that, we didn't. It's varied. We've done a combination of both.
Okay.
My preference, I would love to see it in the budget. Then it reoccurs every year and we can adjust for it. We just didn't have an opportunity over the last year or 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It's sort of similar to the overtime we've run into at times, right?
Yeah, it's just tough to budget. I mean, to the residents, I agree. It should be nice to have it in the budget. We just didn't have that opportunity this year.
Yep. Okay, any other questions on Article 3? Any motions?
A motion to approve this.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. Article 4.
Article 4 is another transfer from free cash in the amount of $241,106 for a variety of one-time expenditures for various departments. Just briefly going through them, and on page 3 of the draft handout. The first is $6,250 for a new voting tabulator to be used at a central tabulation center during elections, specifically needed during early voting, which seems to be something that will occur every statewide or federal election. And then it also be used as a spare in case one of our voting tabulators either isn't functioning properly or breaks down. We'll have one spare to utilize during elections. The second item on the list is the Pinnacle Street culvert. Many of you might know Pinnacle Street is closed due to a failure of a culvert. We're in the process of getting our permits to fix the culvert and open the road. And we have set aside money in the budget to pay for that work. And the remaining amount was going to be paid for through Chapter 90. This $100,000 will allow us to minimize the amount of money we use from Chapter 90 and allow us to use Chapter 90 funds to pave roads and do the other work we had hoped to do with it this year. Pinnacle Street was something that came up as an emergency. It wasn't anything we planned, obviously. So we just like to use the free cash instead of Chapter 90 and let Chapter 90 pave roads and do other things that we had planned for. The next item is $46,802 for a Motorola repeater and its installation. Currently, the repeater for the police department is on loan from a consulting engineer, and it needs to be returned. The infrastructure in our police radios are old, and this repeater will allow us to both own the repeater and upgrade what we currently have. Town Hall Annex is the next item, $44,466 to replace the rooftop units for the HVAC system. The current HVAC system units are 20 to 25 years old. We're having difficulty finding parts to repair and maintain them. And when we do find them, they're costly. The next item is $38,438 for a field sweeper for the Facilities and Grounds Department. This will be used to sweep the fields after they're cut, to get the grass clippings and thatch off the field. Also be used to clean and sweep the walkways, the courts, and pick up trash and debris at our recreation facilities. And then finally, $5,150 will be used to purchase a sander that we can mount on one of the trucks in the Facilities and Grounds Department to sand and salt the parking lots in our facilities.
Okay, any questions from the public? Any from the committee? Any motions?
Motion to accept.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Any opposed? Unanimous.
Article 5 is another transfer from free cash in the amount of $300,000. Funding will be used by the school department for design and engineering of capital improvements to the Heathbrook and Dewing elementary schools. The items that they would like to have an architect or engineer review are items such as new windows, window replacement at the Heathbrook Elementary School, electric upgrade at the Heathbrook Elementary School, improvements to the greenhouse-style classroom that they have at the elementary school, specifically looking at the exterior plexiglass. At both the Heathbrook and Dewing elementary schools, looking at the air circulation within the buildings. At the Dewing Elementary School, they would like an architect or engineer to look at the stone retaining wall in the rear of the school. And then finally, at the Dewing, we'd like to have the roof evaluated to understand its condition and life expectancy. We're not sure that $300,000 will be able to get all of these items, but these are the priority items that they're looking at. As you know, we'll be building a new elementary school over the next few years to replace the North Street and Trahan School, but the Heathbrook and the Dewing will continue as elementary schools, so we're going to need to invest some money in each of those buildings. The school business manager is here tonight, Dave Libby, to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions from the public? Excellent.
This warrant generated many, many questions. I'm never a fan of spending $300,000 to study something. We just indicated that we probably need new windows, maybe some roof work. Why don't we spend $300,000 and just put in new windows without spending $300,000 just studying it? It's a waste of money.
I think the bullet it's not just study, right?
Yeah. And I'll have Dave just go further, but just,
Okay.
I want to point out one thing. The funds are going to be used to actually design the work, not just study it. And in order to do the work, especially on the windows, we need to understand if there's any hazardous materials, the type of windows you're going to put in. The town has under contract 3 architectural and engineering firms that we use. We call them house doctors, and we'll use one of those firms to work with the schools to actually go in and actually come up with a design, a cost estimate that we can come back to in May at town meeting and request the funds to actually do the construction. So to the resident's point, and I don't disagree with this point, sometimes the studies should go right to the actual work. This is going to actually design the product. That's the hope.
Right. So when these come down the pike with the final, it's going to say we need windows. Only the price tag's going to be a couple $1 million.
It could be. I don't know how high it will be, but it'll be significant money, and that's why we're putting money into the stabilization fund with the hope of, using that to pay for
Okay.
it.
You just have to understand, I think studying is a waste of time. If we say we need windows, put the windows in.
I think there's times for studies, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
For those 2 buildings, what were their FY20 budgets for maintenance? And will they be able to cover any of these repairs?
Our maintenance is budgeted at a district-wide level. We don't get down to the state doesn't require us to
Get down to the
identify which school we're doing work at. So it's kind of hard to put a number on how much is specific to a school. The only
What's the overall maintenance budget then?
maintenance is around $2 million, that includes utilities, salaries for custodians, contracted services, things like for HVAC, we contract with the plumbing, electrical, roofing contractors to handle things as they need to be repaired during the school year. So it sort of all rolled into that number.
Okay.
We are often able to do some of these projects within our budget. These particular Heathbrook projects are quite complex. There's so many windows at that school. I tried to go through and take measurements and say, okay, we need 27 48 by 72 windows, and we have to write a spec for this. It has to go out through the 30B process. So we have to be specific on what we're asking folks to bid on. It just was beyond the scope of what we could do. That's why we're asking for some help with design, bid specifications, exactly what we want to put into the building. And the electrical project is really complex there because the electrical service that comes from the street goes into a box inside the building, which isn't the way they do things anymore. That box would normally be outside of the building, so we're going to have National Grid assistance on that. It was something that our maintenance staff wasn't comfortable even trying to tackle in-house.
So is it possible, based on the timeline of events that has to happen, that the actual repair money would be put into the FY21 school budget?
That's what we're hoping to try to just get a number that we can figure out, prioritize, and then figure out what we can fund to do the actual work
Very
in
good.
the future.
That's all the questions.
Good question. Any other questions on Article 5?
Yeah, I just have a comment and a question for Mr. Libby. The past couple of years, we've attributed through free cash and the surplus funds, we raised and appropriated some money out of those accounts, stabilization, free cash, et cetera, for the schools.
Yes.
A couple of those projects, Mr. Chairman, were electrical upgrades for internet services, et cetera. Was the Heathbrook included in that, or the Dewing School?
The Dewing School electrical was upgraded this summer.
Was upgraded this summer?
Yeah.
Okay. And
We added service to the building. We kept the existing as it was. We brought more service, some more capability into the classrooms.
Okay, and in regard to some of the other funds that were appropriated, I can remember numbers, 600,000 and so forth.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a list from your predecessor with regard to capital projects. This year, we did not get a capital projects in the annual budget presentation. We just
Okay.
got this straight school budget, which annoyed me a little bit because that's how we plan here in town, both from a financial point of view, Mr. Chairman. The town manager, we usually try to put a 5-year capital plan together. This year, we did receive none. And now you're coming back, the school department, not you, Mr. Libby, but coming back and asking for 300,000. Could you just update me at least on what was done at the Heathbrook School with the doors? There was a considerable amount of money appropriated for doors on Heathbrook and Dewing.
Yeah.
Could you just update us on those projects, and are they complete, and how much did we spend?
Yeah, the Heathbrook project, the Heathbrook door project and the Dewing door project were both completed this summer.
It was completed.
Yep, yep. Except for painting. The doors themselves, though, were replaced. It came in considerably less than we anticipated, which is another reason we're trying to get some help when we do these estimates to ask for the appropriate amount of money so that we have a better idea of what we're going to spend. I think we had 200,000 appropriated for the Heathbrook doors, and our project came in around I think it was in the $60,000 ballpark to replace the doors there, the doors that we got done. And Dewing was completed around, I think it was $84,000. And I think it was a similar number appropriated for the doors there.
And was the surplus, Mr. Town Manager, turned back?
No, the surplus is still in those articles, and what we've done in the past, we can repurpose that money for some of these projects that might come up.
In the school department?
In the school department, yeah.
Repurpose it?
Yeah, at town meeting, have town meeting.
For maintenance projects?
We could do that, yeah, we could do that.
And this particular list of maintenance project, the reason I'm asking is because those two schools are going to be left after we build the elementary school, Mr. Chairman. And I know that in the past, we haven't spent the amount of money that we should have on maintenance and repair and so forth. And I understand the Dewing is going to get some additional maintenance work through the Green Committee that I just met on with the new grant. We're going to put a new boiler in for energy efficiency. But at least in the coming fiscal year budget, and using the town manager's quote, it's a watch-out budget. I'm just, the fiscal year 21, you know, I'm just hoping that the school department at least give us some kind of planning. And I know you've only been in the position, Mr. Libby, a short time, so you don't have all the history. But I think we do, of different money that was appropriated over the years for technology, et cetera. And we seem to hear the same refrain every single year that we need money for maintenance and so forth. Well, the taxpayers are taking care of at least some of that in a $95 million school project. But I am concerned about the two schools that we're going to be left behind that's going to need some work outside of electrical. I mean, we got other issues within those schools, handicap issues, et cetera.
Right.
You know, so I hope the school department is planning, at least doing some priorities of what needs to be done in the next 2 to 3, 4, 5 years that's coming. And we at least see some kind of a capital plan coming out of them for at least those two pieces of property.
Okay.
You know, so I think, Mr. Libby, I have full respect and appreciate what you do. And I know it's a difficult job, you know, handling the operations and school transportation, et cetera. But the Finance Committee has an obligation too. to the taxpayers.
Yep.
And we make recommendations also to the taxpayer. So I hope you take that and put it under your hat and chew on it for a little while, but
Certainly will.
thank you.
Thanks.
I plan to vote affirmative on this article, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Tom. Any other questions on Article 5? Any motions?
I'll move to adopt.
Second?
A motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Libby.
Sure. Thanks, David.
Number 6.
Article 6 is asking the town to expend $2,200,000 for the design, engineering, and project management of a new DPW and school maintenance facility. And to pay for that $2.2 million, we are asking the town to raise and appropriate $800,000. We are asking for a $700,000 transfer from free cash, and we are asking for a transfer of $350,000 from sewer enterprise fund retained earnings and $350,000 from water enterprise fund retained earnings. Before I go into discuss the project, the funding is available, as I mentioned, because of the free cash that we had certified on July 1st. We also have an additional $800,000 that we can raise and appropriate because state aid came in higher than we anticipated, and state county charges were less than we anticipated, and that made up approximately $500,000 of the $800,000 that we're raising and appropriating. The other $300,000 is from new growth being $300,000 higher than we projected. During the budget process, we projected $800,000 in new growth, and the assessor has sent in her certification, and it's going to be a little over $1.1 million, we hope. It hasn't been certified yet. The retained earnings that are coming from both water and sewer. Water retained earnings for July 1, that were certified July 1, was in the amount of $1,495,574. Retained earnings is similar to free cash. That is a surplus that the water enterprise fund had at the end of the fiscal year that was generated from water revenue coming in higher than projected. Also budget money that was turned back at the end of the fiscal year. But also retained earnings are cumulative from fiscal year to fiscal year, and the balance that was brought forward from the previous fiscal year was a little bit over $236,000. The sewer enterprise fund retained earnings as of July 1, 2019 was certified at $5,948,694. Of that amount, a little bit over $4 million was carried over from the previous fiscal years, not just one fiscal year. There was budgetary turnbacks, and there was revenue came in higher than we projected. The money that we're using from retained earnings from water and sewer are being utilized for this project because both the water and sewer divisions for the DPW are part of the DPW facility operations, and they utilize the facility. I want to note that the sewer enterprise fund specifically, although it has a high amount of retained earnings, we are planning to use over $4 million in retained earnings over the next 7 years to help reduce debt service in our sewer enterprise fund to help stabilize rates. Because of the way debt service was set up, we're going to have still some high debt service over the next 7 years before it drops off. And we're going to use retained earnings to help smooth that debt and help us stabilize the rates. So there is over $5 million in retained earnings, but a significant amount of that retained earnings will be utilized over the next 7 years for that purpose. In regard to the article itself, the Director of Public Works was in meeting with the Board of Selectmen over this past summer to go over his goals and objectives. And as he has in the past, one of the goals has been a new renovations of the DPW facility. It's something that's been in the capital budget. It's something that's been discussed at Board of Selectmen's meetings during the capital budget review, as well as during goals and objectives for the department. As you know, we brought forward a debt exclusion a few years back that did not pass, and that was for a renovation and expansion of the facility. During our last meeting with the Board of Selectmen, it was decided that it was time to address this issue properly, and that was to build a new facility. And the selectmen asked the director and myself to go back and bring forward a plan to take down the current facility and build a new DPW facility, similar to what we've done with other buildings in the community. The plan is to use its $2.2 million to fund the design of the project, so we have a solid cost estimate to come to May town meeting with. It also will bring us to the point that we can bid the project. The funds will not get us through the actual construction, but it will get us up to bidding the project. We anticipate the cost of this project to be $25.1 million. It will include both the DPW facility and the school maintenance facility, since the school maintenance facility will be taken away when the new elementary school is built. So we thought it was a good opportunity to combine both facilities. Currently, the DPW facility that is being utilized is 25,900 square feet. We are proposing to build a facility that is 49,488 square feet. It will allow us to house our vehicles. It will allow us to build a wash bay for all town vehicles. We will have a new maintenance facility that would be safer and appropriate for the vehicles that are being serviced by our maintenance staff. We will have proper facilities for the school maintenance department and new offices for the DPW administration and staff. So that's the plan in bringing this forward, and the most important part that I want to stress, the goal is to fund this project within the tax levy. Now, I also want to say that it's not a guarantee at this point till I see what the finances look like over the next 6 months and going into the 2021 budget. But the plan is to fund this project through a borrowing and also utilizing some of the reserves that we have, whether it's retained earnings from the Water Enterprise and Sewer Enterprise Fund or their stabilization funds and the General Fund Stabilization Fund, to help reduce that projected amount of $25.1 million so we can borrow obviously less. The $800,000 that we're raising and appropriating in this article will be used towards debt service for the project. So the hope is that we can bring this project in within the tax levy and not have to do a debt exclusion like we have for other projects. We're going to work hard at that. At this moment, I am confident that we can do it, but I also want to make sure everyone understands, there may be an issue that we can't overcome. One being we're projecting the cost to be 25.1 at this point, and things may change when the estimates come in. But that's the goal that we have. As you know from touring this facility, it's in need of, I can't even say an upgrade, it should be taken down and a new building built. Over the next 6 months, we will have an owner's project manager on board, an architect on board, and we'll start the process of designing a new facility.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the public?
Chairman Joe Gill, I have a couple of points that I would like to address. First of all, shouldn't the enterprise funds be used to reduce the rates of for the residents on the services that they get?
I mean, Obviously, the answer to that is yes, and we do that, we try to do that every year. Rates did not increase this year. But retained earnings in the past have been used to fund capital improvements and one-time expenditures, which this project would be. And water and sewer are part of this facility, and we think it's appropriate that funding from the enterprise helps pay for the percentage that we believe that they're part of the facility. It's just an approach to funding this.
Mr. Chairman, one of the complaints the residents have is that they think they're paying an excessive amount for water and sewer. And here we are showing a profit, and we should be returning this money to the ratepayers.
Well, that's an option, right? But I don't know if you've toured the DPW, but I think this is a total appropriate use of these funds.
It may be an appropriate use, and it is an appropriate use of funds to take care of their facility. But we have the residents under great burdens right now. And if we collect more money than we take in for the different services, we should be returning that to them in the form of a rate cut.
Okay, so if we do that, and then we have to do some sort of improvement to the DPW, we're going to be spending that money probably with a debt exclusion and be raising, tax money. Am I talking out of school?
Right, we're going to have to.
So you're going to be
To take this project, we'll need to get the funding somewhere, and I think when it comes to water and sewer, we have not directly used retained earnings or our surplus revenue to reduce rates, but we have used it in a way that has allowed us not to increase rates in future years. For example, we've used it to fund water distribution projects, avoiding the borrowing of those funds, which has interest on those funds, which impact rates in the future. So we've used it to address capital and one-time expenditures that has allowed us to either keep rates stable with no increase or minimal increases. And if we use this money, and if we don't use this money in this way, as you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we'll have to come from other places and probably force us into a debt exclusion for it.
Okay, to my second point, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We have embarked on a great building boom in this town of public buildings. The taxpayers are going to be paying a lot of money in the next few years to pay for these new buildings. I think it's about time we take a rest and have a plan for this in the future. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of comments. The first one is, I'm happy to see, even on a small level, an indication of combining the school department maintenance function with the town-wide maintenance function. There's no real reason that those two should be separated. And it makes an awful lot of sense to create somewhere a town-wide maintenance department, both because it's more efficient to have them all in one space, or in one space, but also because when times get bad, every department but one focuses on cutting maintenance costs. And the only department that won't do that is the maintenance department. And that's why we need a separate maintenance department that takes care of the whole town. So that's the first thing. I'm happy to see that. I hope it continues. I have my fears that it won't, but I hope it does. The second thing is, I didn't know where to ask this question, but there's a big raise and appropriate dollar amount in this one, so I'll ask it here. In fiscal 2019, I read in the Lowell Sun that the average home suffered a tax increase of about $300. Assuming that the town meeting passes everything in this, what will the average tax bill increase be for fiscal 2020?
Assuming all the articles pass? Was that your
What's that?
question? Assuming all the articles pass?
Yes.
Do you have that number, Andy?
So, and this is, I sent this to the Finance Committee as information on what we believe the estimate will be. And Mr. Kelly, you know, this is based on the current values that we have today, the current shift that we have today. That may all change when DOR changes things in the next couple of months. But if everything stayed the same, the average increase, which includes the school debt exclusion, would be $514.30. And the way that breaks out essentially is the 2.5% increase is approximately $145 increase. New growth, when you increase new growth, that could be about an $81 increase. And then the debt exclusion increase is approximately $287.52 to the average home. So that's how we come up with the 15.
Okay.
The
So
amount.
about $500.
$500, yeah, $514.
Okay. I was trying to minimize it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can give you this.
I don't want to touch it. Thanks. That sounds horrible to me. Let me ask the committee, how's that sound to you?
Well, I can speak from someone who's been here nearly 30 years in this town. I've seen the town go through a lot of changes. I've seen some very depleted areas. My children all went through these schools. They talked about how horrible they were. I got to see how horrible they were. The schools needed to get done. As a community, if we didn't improve conditions in this community, we kicked the can down the road long before I got here. So if we didn't take some action to improve things, it wasn't going to get better. It's not a fine wine. It's not going to get better with age. We, as a community, kicked the can down the road too far, and we had too many things bundle up that needed to get done. So do I like that number? As a taxpayer, I don't like that number. But as a finance committee member who's looking at value back to the community, I see that we have to do this for my family's next generation.
Okay, let me ask another question. Did the Finance Committee know that this was coming? Did the Finance Committee know 2 years ago that the average taxpayer was going to pay $300 more last year and $500 more this year? That's rhetorical. It seems to me that the financial leaders in the town manager, the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen specifically, ought to know that this type of increase is coming and be prepared to defend it, to let people know it's coming so we can plan for it. We can't. There was an article in the newspaper last year that Selectman was quoted as saying that the $300 increase was a good one for the town, for taxpayers. I thought $300 was out of line. I assumed when I asked the question tonight, I was going to hear something in the order of $200. I'm shocked, and I'm very disappointed in all the leadership of the town. That's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
I would like to add one thing, though. Part of the leadership of this community is town meeting. And town meeting also has an obligation to the community to make sure we collectively don't kick things down the road.
That's right. Now, you've been around quite a while. You know that when we get to the October special town meeting, as a practical sense, it's too late, almost, for town meeting to say no. In my experience at town meeting that goes back to 1972, in this stage of the process, and that's over, 45 years, town meeting at this stage in the process has said no once. It's a mess when that happens. Do you think it should happen again?
I think we need more participation as a community at all of the town meetings and at all of the committee hearings like this so that we really aren't neglecting ourselves as a community, so that we're not in a position where we have to bundle massive projects together, because I hate to see that. As a homeowner, I look at things down the road too, and I say, man, I really don't want to replace the hot water heater and the air conditioning units and everything in the roof all in the same year or two. So I look down the road and I say to myself, yes, I don't want to bundle all those in the same year. I'm going to spread them out over time. But unfortunately, as a community, we haven't been good at that. And that's not a knock on any one committee or any of the residents. It's just something that we as a community have to get better at so that we never put ourselves in this position again.
What planning can an individual individual citizen do?
Participate. Come to annual town meeting, come to special town meeting, come to the finance committee meetings, the board of selectmen meetings. Participation is where you get educated.
The power to do the planning rests not with the individual citizens. It rests with the town manager, the board of selectmen.
I agree, but it's an individual's
the finance-
responsibility
the
to
finance committee.
participate and challenge us.
Okay. And the board of selectmen and the school committee. That's where the power is. The citizens, their only power is to say no. And saying no at town meeting, especially this late in the year, is a disaster.
I won't belabor the point, but
Okay.
just to say
Okay.
that
I won't-
we as a
I won't
community
Okay,
do this.
all right, thank you.
Just one follow-up.
Sure.
If you take away the debt exclusion increase, the average increase to the homeowner would have been $227.
Sorry, what was the number again?
Took away the debt exclusion increase, which is mainly the school, the average increase to the homeowner would have been $227.
Okay.
So the school obviously had a big impact to that. The school was voted on by the residents at a local election, and the authorization to borrow was done at town meeting. So that makes this increase unique for this year. The Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the general public who were watching the budget presentation in January, I gave a projection of what the budget that was being presented would, how that would impact the average homeowner's taxes. At that time, I think I estimated $193 on the average home. The only change between then and now was an increase in new growth from $800,000 to $800,000 to 1.1, which increased that average home tax estimate. And we didn't know what the school was going to be, so now you would add the school into that. So that those two factors change. So we do talk about what we believe the impacts are, and a big impact to the taxes in this community are debt exclusions. And all of those debt exclusions went in front of the voters at a town election and then to a town meeting to authorize the borrowing, and they approved it. And the document that I sent the Finance Committee, of the average home on their tax bill, $955 of it are for debt exclusions. That's a large amount.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we've had this discussion many times at Finance Committee meetings, and you know, it's all in the debt exclusion. If you took the debt exclusions away, the tax bills would have a tax increase more in line with what Mr. Kelly thought it should be, around 200, I think he mentioned. That's where we would be. The school had a major impact. We need the new school. We need new buildings. We need things upgraded. They were let go for a long time. A lot of decisions came at once in this community, and now, unfortunately, we're paying for it. But the taxpayers, the residents, have voted for it, not just at town meeting, at local elections.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gill?
Thank you. As a former member of the Board of Selectmen and the, is this on?
I don't think so.
And the Finance Committee, I wish to reclassify what's going on here tonight. You, the Finance Committee, the last bastion of the taxpayers of this town, you're supposed to be the defender of the taxpayers. look after every dollar we spend, and you're not supposed to be a friend of any of these departments. You're supposed to be looking out for the taxpayer, you're the taxpayer's friend. And I wish you'd do that. As a taxpayer, I'm asking you to, let's go to a pause and have a timeout till everybody can catch up. Not spend money like we are now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I believe that's what we're doing here is trying to look out for the taxpayer. We all live here. We all pay taxes. As Dave said, we've kicked the can down the road for many years, and now the bills are coming due. Any other questions on Article 6?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Tom.
There's a lot Mr. Gill is in. Again, I fully respect Mr. Kelly's comments too. But sitting on this committee for 30 years, I have been, and I've seen a lot of changes, as Mr. Asnavorian pointed out, and in some respects, I do agree with Mr. Asnavorian. But I, as a finance committee member, as I look at a budget, and the town manager will bear me out on this, I try to analyze everything that comes to this committee from a financial point of view. From a resident's point of view, it's very hard for me to bite my tongue at times because I know a lot of the history, as you, Mr. Gill, and Mr. Kelly have served this town. I've seen and lived in the school department for 6 years as a committee member. I've sat on this committee for 30 years. I've sat on the municipal building committee for 7 years as we built the DPW as it exists today. The senior center, part of it has been demolished, but I've worked on a lot of buildings here in town. And when we look at the buildings as an individual, I do, being an engineer, I do see the lack of maintenance, et cetera. And I do know that the reasons we are in the position today is because we have ignored certain things throughout the town when it comes. I fully support what Mr. Kelly stated about maintenance and combining things and being efficient. That is one of my goals sitting on this committee, is to become more efficient. But when I sit down with the town manager and I see the town reject a DPW facility that is necessary for the safety of our workers, and why the town taxpayer turned it down, because we had the alternative of a fire station. Here we are coming back and asking for another $2 million. Hopefully we don't have to spend it for a $15.6 million budgeted fire station. I would hope that the town manager, when he writes his watch our budget letter this year, that he looks at every single department and says, you're not going to get everything you wish for, as he's done in the past. But the town manager has done an excellent job, in my opinion, of coming back in the fall. Yes, I don't think it's the right time to bring money articles like this back to special town meeting, but we know what the strategic plan is. At the annual town meeting, we get 300, 330, 350 members, a better representation of the town than we do at a special town meeting. I'm not saying that's the strategy, bring the articles, money articles at special town meeting because of the lower populated town meeting. I honestly believe that some of these things should be in the annual town meeting, where we have greater representation. We also have greater representation when we ask for bond debt in the ballot box. When we had the school, the $95 million project, yes, that was in the ballot box. But there was a strategic political plan for that too. Nobody wants to talk about it. When you combine sports and school children in this town, you're going to get a popular vote on anything that the school department does, either in the sports facility or in the school facilities. Children are emotional, and sports are very active in this town. So the strategic plan, I'm not saying this is what happened, put it on the ballot, let the town people vote. That's what we try to do to make it a democratic process. But there is a need, in my opinion, for at least the ones I'm voting positive on here. I am shocked at the $514. I'm very shocked at that. From a taxpayer point of view, I moved into town in 1973, 72, 73, 45 some odd years ago. My tax bill was $1,230. Today, it's over $6,600. Tax, that's just my residential. Now, if I add in sewer and water, add that $1,100 on, that's $7,200. If I add in all the other fees, thank God we don't have a rubbish fee, but it's probably coming as an enterprise system, the taxes are going to be in the vicinity of $8,000 to $9,000. Now with this 514, like I said, I got to go talk to my banker. But it is a tough job, as you know, Jay. You sat here on this finance committee. Joe Gill has sat on it, and I fully appreciate everything that you've done and respect some of your statements here tonight. But when I look at the people that are coming into town, new residents, we have to sell this town to get additional revenue. I stand on the revenue side of things, try to increase the revenue, but I don't want to do it through the real estate tax either. But there's other ways that we can increase revenue coming into this town. But again, I fully respect Mr. Asnavorian's comment for his 30-plus years, our new member, Jason, our new members on the end here, Susan and Donna. We do work hard analyzing everything that the town manager gives us. I especially, because I have a little bit more history with the Finance Committee, and I try to educate some of my fellow Finance Committee members. But I've said enough, but I fully appreciate what Richard is doing because he's giving us the information that I, as a member on this committee, didn't get from previous town administrators. It was just done on its own without an explanation. And I fully appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. Thank you. Any other questions on Article number 6? No? Any motions on Article 6?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The chair says aye. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. Number 7.
Article 7 transfers $2,256,048 from certified free cash into the stabilization fund. This is the remaining balance of free cash after the warrant articles that we previously talked about, if they're funded. Currently, the stabilization fund has $3,595,600 as a balance. The amount we're transferring in will bring the total to $5,851,708. As we discussed tonight, when you had the business manager here, as well as you know from reviewing the 5-year plan that was presented in March, we still have a lot of work to do on facilities and on buildings and purchase of equipment, so the stabilization fund will help fund town and school one-time and capital expenditures.
Okay, any questions from the public? If you have a question, can you come up to the podium? Oh, sorry, 7. Number 7. Okay. Any from the committee? Any motions?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Number 8.
Article 8 seeks authorization to borrow $2,500,000 for the Center Fire Station project. The town has previously appropriated $15,896,809 for the project. The estimates that we're seeing are higher than that. We're hoping that we do not need this additional funding. We plan to bid the project in January, where we believe we'll have a better and more favorable bidding climate, that we can stay within the budget for the project. But I just want to have the money available in case the prices come in higher than we anticipate. The project currently is the design is being completed by HKT Architects. Over the past 6 to 7 months, we've been working on alternatives for parking for the facility. The plan originally was to bid this sometime in this past May, but we just felt that we wanted to look at other options for parking. And then once we got past May, we felt that the bidding climate over the summer or in the fall would not be advantageous, and the best time to bid these projects is in January, when contractors are preparing for the construction season. I hope we don't need to use this funding. It's just precautionary in case the bids come in higher in January. I won't have an opportunity to seek funding at that time. We are looking to, we're working with Bank of America for parking on their lot and their rear lot, instead of building parking in the rear of the site. So that will help us. We just haven't, Bank of America's taken a long time to finalize an agreement, and we hope to see that over the next couple of weeks. So this, again, is just a precaution in case bids come in higher. And we have been seeing bids higher than normal because of the trade issues that we're seeing throughout the world, not just this country. Goods are higher, and materials costs are higher, and contractors are busy, which is a bad recipe for bids. So again, as Tom mentioned, Mr. Cook mentioned earlier in his discussions, I'm hoping not to use this money, but I just don't know what the bids are going to come in at this point.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the public?
This is a simpler question. If you have to borrow that money, is that excluded from Proposition 2.5 also?
It would be, and the impact is, from looking at it, was around $16 or $17.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin Donnelly, 8 Westland Drive. I just have one question on this, the $2.5 million. As you just stated, if you actually need this money, it's going to add to the exclusion under Prop 2.5. That seems to exceed normal inflation and incidental costs. I don't see how that's legal to do that without a new Proposition 2.5. And if you say, well, it ended up costing more, well, maybe we should do a little better project management and bring it in at the amount of money that we asked the voters to vote on, rather than come back a year later and say, we need another 20%. I mean, if this is going to happen, somebody can come in and on the new high school, on the new elementary school in 3 years and say, we need another $20 million, the cost ran higher. And the exclusion means nothing. I think this $2.5 million has no way that it can come about or should come about. This is an extra $2.5 million to the taxpayers. It's not included in the exclusion. The voters never voted on it. This is awful. It's just simply awful. I don't see how you could even caution that. And the other thing is, Article 7, the $2.2 million in putting away. I remember a year or two ago, and I forget there was an article that the costs were on an exclusion article exceeded the basis of the exclusion. And we took the money out of free cash to fund it. Why don't we take this 2.2 million and fund this thing if it's really needed? Because otherwise, it's not. And why don't you have some project management? You haven't even started it and you've already blown the budget. Cut it back then. Don't spend it. We don't have money for everything, as my two colleagues have said. We got to have some controls on things, and right now it looks like they're out of control. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? So, Richard, would you wait on borrowing, wait and see, or?
Oh, yeah, we're not going to borrow
Don't do
the money until
anything.
after we get bids in and
Gotcha.
understand if we even need it. And if, depending on what the price cost is, we'll see what we can do about whether we need to borrow or not. I mean, we are trying to, the reason why we've delayed the project is because, we want to bid it at the right time. We've delayed the project because we're trying to avoid the cost of building parking in the back. So we have tried to do some project management to bring this cost within the budget. And I'm hoping we can do that. I'm hoping we can do that.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I can't control the cost of construction at this point. We see it with all of our projects.
Yep. Seeing no questions, do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All any opposed? Chair votes aye. Article 9.
Article 9 is asking town meeting to appropriate $350,000 from the Community Preservation Fund undesignated reserve. The funds will be used to install new lights and poles and associated electric at Hazel Field, which is at Saunders Recreation Field on Livingston Street. This is a project that was brought forward to us in discussions with the girls' youth softball, who had asked that we put lights around a field at the Field of Dreams. As you know, over the last couple of years, we have installed, using community preservation funds, we've installed lights at Memorial Field, State Field, and the Little League fields on Chandler Street. This is just the next phase on lighting we want to provide at our youth sports complex. As you know, they're used quite a bit by the youth in this community, and the lights allow us to have more field availability for them for their use during the year. Again, we've used Community Preservation Act funding in the past for these projects. It's a allowable use, and it's something, again, that we've done in previous town meetings.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? Any questions from the committee? Any motions?
I'll motion to accept this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Unanimous. Number 10.
Have the director come up and sit for this discussion. So Article 10, this is an article to create an enterprise fund account for stormwater management operations. On page 5 of the handout, it starts an explanation of what we're trying to do. We have enterprise funds currently in the community for water, sewer, and cable enterprise. This one would be specific to stormwater management operations. As we have discussed in the past, the town is under a federal EPA municipal stormwater permit that it has to comply with. The town does not have a funding source to comply with that permit, and the permit has a significant annual cost and has a significant capital cost that we need to fund for the program to meet the compliance needs. The setting up a enterprise fund will allow us to recommend to the selectmen a fee that would be implemented on July 1st of 2020. The revenue from that fee would go into the enterprise fund, where it's separate and distinct from the general fund and other funds specific for stormwater management. It will allow us to track the revenues and expenses for stormwater management. Town meeting will have the authority to approve the budget each year, as they do for cable, water, and sewer. And the selectmen will be the board that will adopt the fee on an annual basis, or initially and then on an annual basis decide if it needs to be adjusted. Just to give you an idea, over the next 5 years, the average cost of this program for capital and operating needs is a little over $1.5 million. But annually, to comply with this permit, the cost to the town is on average, $939,343 over the next 5 years. Of that $939,343, we already have $376,926 on average over the next 5 years within the budget. So the net amount that we need just to comply with the permit, this is no capital, this is just compliance with the permit, we'll need to fund, on average over the next 5 years, $562,417. And right now, we have no funding mechanism for that. The fee would help or go towards the compliance of the stormwater permit. The stormwater permit has two major areas of compliance. One is the annual water quality compliance, and then the operation and maintenance compliance of the permit. There have been some questions of what the operation and maintenance compliance means to the town, and that's areas such as catch basin cleaning, street sweeping, inspecting, maintaining town detention basins. We have approximately 46 of those in town. Cleaning and inspecting drains and manholes, staffing and equipment's included in that, but the staffing and equipment is already within the budget. It's important to note that this enterprise fund and this fee is not looking to hire any staff. It is solely to comply with the new permit and to undertake the capital projects that are needed to improve the stormwater management system within the community. Without an enterprise fund and ultimately a fee, as I mentioned earlier, we simply have no other mechanism to fund compliance of the permit and to undertake projects. Currently, we utilize either the stabilization fund, free cash, or Chapter 90 money. And then the amount that we currently have in the budget, which doesn't get us to where we need to be with compliance. By having a fee designated for stormwater management, we can use those reserves that we would normally use for this operation, or the Chapter 90 money that we use for stormwater operations to address other capital needs. Specific to Chapter 90, we would be able to pave more roads, install more sidewalks as residents have been asking for, but this fee would solely be dedicated to stormwater management. For the committee, we've talked about this in the past, and I think the explanation and the presentation that was made to the committee knows that complying with the stormwater permit is important, and we need to do it. But what's more important is the fact that we properly maintain our stormwater system regardless of the permit. Drainage in this community is a problem. There essentially is not a drainage system in this town. We have 46 detention basins that I mentioned earlier that have had no maintenance and no attention. They're not working properly. We have streets that flood frequently. I would say most of the calls, other than a Wednesday trash day call, most of the calls we get are from residents who want drainage on their streets fixed. Flooding is a problem. This fee will allow us the mechanism to address those problems over the next 5 years and longer. So regardless of the compliance with the fee, clean waterways in the community, addressing pollution issues when it comes to our waterways and stormwater, and improving the drainage in the community are the most important thing. And we need to do that as a community regardless of compliance with the permit.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the public?
I read the write-up on Article 10. It's a nice job. It really was. I can see the need. My only concern, and I just wanted mentioned, is that, you know, an enterprise fund is an end run around Prop 2.5 and real estate taxes. I understand to raise the money, they'd have to go to an exclusion or something, or a permanent increase under 2.5. But once this is set up, it takes a life of its own. It's not subject to 2.5. And I'm very, very leery of setting up more enterprise funds. I don't think they're a good thing to do. I think you made a good case that you need the money. You need to do the drain things, but you should go to an override. But make it part of the budget. Make in future years it be subject to review and people looking at it more than an enterprise fund. And I'm not knocking the water and sewer. I'm just saying enterprise funds by themselves are avoiding Prop 2.5. Then why do we have Prop 2.5? I think you should be careful going down this road. I think you should finance this under the regular budget somehow, not as an enterprise fund. Thanks.
Thank you.
Town manager had mentioned a 5-year period, but I get the impression this is a permanent function that we're going to have to maintain, and that an enterprise fund will be permanent. Would a roughly $1 million a year expenditure be required permanently?
Well, we only looked out the next 5 years, but we'll probably need about $1 million every year for, I don't want to say permanently because I can't,
Yeah.
you know, and Mr. Kelly, you know, it's tough. Even projecting 5 years is difficult.
Okay.
That's all we projected at the moment.
Okay. What's the alternative to an enterprise fund?
Well, if we didn't do the enterprise fund, and this is something I was thinking about, was the selectmen can adopt a fee and it would go into the general fund as part of general revenues, and you would set up a budget within the general fund budget, and that revenue would offset it. The problem you run into is if there are deficits and in that budget, then the general fund would subsidize it, so you could have problems there, but that's one alternative. The other alternative, as Mr. Donnelly mentioned, would be you could go to the, you could do an operating override specific for stormwater. You could set up a special revenue account and put the fee in that. But I think to just go a little bit beyond that, I think the enterprise fund is a very transparent way of showing the revenues collected and the costs of a particular utility, which this would essentially be a stormwater utility. And I know the current enterprise funds have left bad taste in people's mouth, and I understand that. But I think from an accounting standpoint and a transparency standpoint, the enterprise fund really shows you everything. And town meeting still has control of it. And it's still a budget that has to come forward like any budget that we present during the budget process. So those are the alternatives, and that's why I think the enterprise fund might be a little bit better.
Okay. I've seen how the sewer and water funds work, and I get a different impression. They seem to disappear. They don't get the scrutiny that, for example, the DPW budget gets. And I think this would happen with the stormwater account. I'm really reluctant to approve another one. And besides the opposite of transparency, is what I think happens, I also see what I think is a tendency to take items that really belong in, for example, in the DPW budget, move them to a sewer and water account and fund them through that when they shouldn't be. And then that opens up more money that can be spent under Proposition 2.5. It's a way of artificially increasing the amount of money the town can spend. That shouldn't happen. For that reason, I'd be opposed to creating another big enterprise fund if there's a reasonable alternative. So that leads to the other question. What happens if we just say no to an enterprise fund now?
We would have to, well, we'd have to go back and think about what the alternatives that I just mentioned, how we can bring those forward, and regroup and you know, talk to the selectmen, have some meetings with the selectmen and see if there's an interest in still implementing a fee that would go into the general fund, that we would bring forward a stormwater operations budget within the DPW that fee would fund. So we'd have to just have to look at something like that. That's probably the alternative route that we would have to go.
Okay. Is there any state or federal pressure on the town now to do something with a time limit on it?
Yeah, I mean, the permit has been in place, it's in a year and a half, and there is pressure on communities to bring forward some type of a utility like this. We're part of a large collaborative of other communities investigating this. We've been doing that for the last couple of years. And the federal government is going to find communities that aren't in compliance. They're giving them time to get their feet on the ground with the new permit, but they are eventually going to come in and start finding communities. They have found communities that have ignored it. So from that standpoint, there is pressure. We don't want to be in that position. There are communities that have already established enterprise funds, and there are communities that have established fees, similar to what we're doing. So there is pressure to come up with a mechanism to address compliance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to note that we definitely review the enterprise fund budgets just like any other department budget during our budget cycle.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have one quick comment. Since we're talking about a liquid, whether it's sewer or water, why can't this be incorporated in the existing enterprise fund that we have?
Yeah, it's a question we've asked ourselves, but...
What was the answer?
Yeah, the answer is no, because water it's distinct for water and sewer. We tried to really make the argument that, especially where towns have combined sewer drains and sewer and stormwater drains, that maybe you could utilize a portion of a sewer rate or a water rate. But we haven't seen that approved anywhere, but we did think about that. Believe me,
Okay.
I'm not looking forward to bringing new fees and things like this forward, but this was the result of what we've seen from other communities and the best approach. But we did look at that.
Okay. I attended one of the presentations that you and Mr. Gilbert gave, and at that time there was money attached to the presentation about what it would cost the average homeowner. Shouldn't that be on this article?
Isn't it? I think
Yeah,
it
I
is.
think it is.
It
It's
is.
on page 6 of your,
Yeah, it's in,
It's in the handout. Is that what you're referring
I think
to?
it's in the handout.
$30
Oh.
per year per small residential parcel, and $45 per year depending upon
It's in the
How
hand.
they want it to be funded.
But
I just
this,
got the handout this evening. I haven't had a chance to study it.
but this article doesn't specify a rate.
No, because this article really is just establishing the
yeah.
fund. It's not really just addressing a rate at this moment, because the board hasn't made a decision on the rate yet, and we haven't brought up budget forward to them
Yep.
yet. So if the article is simply to adopt an enterprise fund, plus the executive summaries for all these articles, as we've talked about in the past, we don't want to be in a position where we're advocating within these executive summaries. You have 100 words you can use, and we try to just keep it very general, be more specific in the handout. And I apologize that the handout's being given out tonight, but I'd like to get through this committee meeting in case there are input from the residents or the finance committee that we may change things, but tomorrow this will be on the website. We'll get all the information out to our residents that it's available to start looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Actually, just one, Mr. Chairman, and this is actually to Mr. Kelly. I should have asked while he was still up there. Just a clarifying question. Was the concern about the enterprise fund more the reporting out of it?
Was that for Mr. Kelly?
Yes, that was.
Mr. Kelly? Can you come back up to the microphone for a second? No? Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, sorry to ask you to walk up. I just wanted to follow up. Was your concern about the enterprise fund more about the reporting out of it, of where the funds are going?
That's part of it. And, yeah, that's the major thing.
All right, we can work on that with the town manager to make sure that that is presented in a more reasonable way.
Well, it's not just the reporting of it, it's what's, that's a paperwork thing. I mean, it could be reported that there are shovels being bought for the DPW. It'd be good if that's reported when it shouldn't be done, but the fact is, I don't want it being done. I think things like that are being done in the water and sewer enterprise fund.
So your concern,
I have to say,
your concern is two-part. One is the visibility of where the money is going, but that there is a fear that it could be going for other purposes other than what was really intended.
that's correct, yes. Yes. And that's why I have an aversion to enterprise funds. I don't think, I think they're theoretically more transparent, but in reality they're not, and they are subject to abuse. Because you can switch things that should be coming out of the general fund to being expensed from the enterprise funds, which then lets you spend money that's raised in the general fund for other things.
So you'd be more comfortable if we had some kind of a governance statement around how the funds could be utilized out of an enterprise fund?
No, because if it was being done right, you don't need the statement to say, do it right.
Yep. I understand what you're saying.
No.
And this has been discussed in the past where we're purchasing equipment for the water enterprise fund, and maybe the general fund highway's using it, using shovels,
I
for his
gotcha.
example.
I got you.
Could that happen? I have to really delve into it to see. My guess is the general fund probably subsidizes them also. I'm sure there are things they share. But I understand your point.
And that may be historical. You know, my memory goes back too far to say that it's still going on.
Yeah, I'd like to
I
think
would like to
it's.
assure you that it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I appreciate you
never
coming
mind.
back up to clarify
I know
that.
I know what you're saying.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's a good point.
Thank you for coming back up to clarify.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions on Article 10?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Tom?
Where do I start?
At the beginning.
At the beginning. Stole my line. Richard, if you can't answer this, maybe Brian Gilbert can. Where does, the permit fee that I see in the paperwork that I've reviewed so far to date is around $234,000 some odd dollars, correct? For the permit fee?
To comply with the permit fee?
To have the permit, to file the permit fee?
To file it?
Yeah, in the breakdown of the finance part of the project, of the enterprise, there's a permit fee listed, the compliance permit fee, stormwater management fee, permit fee. As part of the revenue side of the budget, putting money into the budget, $234,000.
I don't have that number, but I would like to, I guess just to clarify, there is two parts to the compliance issue. There's operational compliance, and then there's water quality compliance.
Right.
Water quality compliance will average over the 5-year permit $295,000.
And where does that money go?
That money,
Yeah, it's listed on the top.
yeah, that money would go to, well, there's a list of things that we're required to do. There's some 200 activities over the 5 years that we have to comply with. They range.
If you go to page 6 in the handout,
Yeah.
there's a list of, it breaks down operations and maintenance requirements for the permit. And under water quality, it talks about the things that we need to comply with. That are, one is impaired water requirements, which includes education of best practices for residents and businesses in regard to topics like pet waste, septic systems, grass clipping fertilizers, leaf litter disposal, construction site practices. So there's an education component that you have to comply with.
Okay, I read all that, Richard, but the compliance permit, it mentions compliance permit application, and there's an amount of money attached to that.
Like a filing fee?
Yes, $230 some odd thousand.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember seeing that.
The reason I'm asking the question is because in detail, I went through that finance package that you sent us that Weston and Sampson had performed. And first of all, I don't like the use of the word urban. I'd rather see, urban to me is city, but rural is Tewksbury. And when they use words like that, it kind of sends the red flag up for me. But I looked at the financing part of it, and they talked about the ERUs and so forth, and the average square footage of a home. As I said the other night when I looked at the information, I wanted to crunch some numbers. Well, I did crunch some numbers. And I went through the GPS process. I took the square miles of the roads in town. I took the square miles of the Interstate 495 and 93 that abut us in town. I also realized the town has surrounded by a lot of wetlands, rivers, Heathbrook, Stonewater Brook, Shawshene River, and the waterways that all of these wetland areas drain into. And then I looked at the actual fee that is not proposed. It's being analyzed, using the acronym ERU, equivalent residential unit, of 4,950 square feet per household. And then I looked at the commercial property, and I saw a number of 33 million some odd square feet of commercial property that includes their roofs and parking areas and so forth. Then I also found the word illicit. The word illicit to me means somebody's violating it. I am going to, Mr. Chairman, and reluctantly using Mr. Kelly's words, probably vote in the affirmative on enterprise system, but I don't think the equity is there for the homeowner and the commercial property and the federal and Massachusetts Highway Department. As I stated the other night, Mr. Chairman, I am familiar with the State Highway Department and how they drain their stormwater off their highways. I'm thoroughly familiar with a working knowledge of what the town DPW does on stormwater management and how they manage it. Again, no reflection on you, Brian, but over the years, we haven't managed it very well because we cannot find a lot of cistern-type drainage that comes from the catch basins that are collectively collected on a road or a street and go to a cistern that's underneath the macadam of the roadway. We spend forever trying to find the drainage that it goes into. But when I look at a home of average 4,970 square feet, I looked at the 10 homes in Hallmark Gardens, which is the development I live in. Hallmark Gardens has been there since 1970. The average home in that neighborhood has a square footage of 2,370 square feet. So automatically deduced, I looked at the roadway because the ERU includes the roadways in town. If we have over 108 miles of roadway, and I did the GPS calculation with the help of Google and the GPS information that's out there, and I looked at the roadways and so forth. If you take an average roadway in town at 22 foot wide and take 100 feet long, you can come up with pretty much the square footage. I come up with over 33 million square feet of roadway, not counting the federal highway, 38, Route 38, 93, and 495. I come up with a lot of square footage. So when I do that division as the finance plan that Weston and Sampson did, I think that's where the 4,970. If I take the residential street that my home and the 9 other homes in Hallmark Gardens, the street is 22 feet wide. I have 150-foot frontage. I'm expected to pay for that non-pervious roadway also. That's why I asked the question about the permit. This regulation, clean water management or stormwater management, came from the Clean Water Act of the federal government. The Massachusetts was mandated to adopt a federal government stormwater management plan. I go back to the original sewer. When we started sewers in town, I sat on the committee that we established a sewer program. That same history is there, the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act has been mandated by the federal government. They are not contributing in any way so far to this so-called management plan, nor has the state. That if we're paying for a permit, or filing for a permit, and we're paying a fee, are we paying to help the state out too, to handle their stormwater management? So like I said at the very beginning, I'm inclined to approve and vote yes on an enterprise system, but when I look at the finance part of it and how the homeowner is going to get hit with a fee of whether it's $30, $75, it's another fee that they're going to see on their sewer and water bill. But I don't see the justification yet. If I do all the numbers, if I did all my numbers correctly, I don't see the justification for a homeowner getting whacked with another $75 to help supplement stormwater management for the town on the town roadways, which is over 100 and some odd miles, for the state highway, 93, 495, and all the development that has taken place or has taken place, whether you're talking the industrial facilities, the Demoulas Market, the illicit part of it is I would like to see a policy of how the violators are going to be hit to supplement that revenue. There's no policy yet for stormwater violation. I would rather see that in place by the time we set up fees, etc. Because I, as a homeowner, I know what I do in my driveway. My driveway is 30 feet wide, 15-foot setback. I know what the square footage. I know what the square footage of my roof is. I know what the impervious soil, I have an acre of land. I know what the impervious soil is around my home. But I'm going to be part of this so-called stormwater management for 4,970 square feet. I don't own that, of impervious soil. Yes, I do wash my car in the driveway. I do use detergent to wash the car. Whether that's a hazardous material for the stormwater management, I'll tell you right now, the salt that we put on the road every winter is going into that stormwater. That's why there's a stormwater management plan. Everything that comes out of Market Basket with 35 diesel trucks sitting up there that's sitting on a parking impervious soil that's leaking diesel fuel, that's washing off. Every parking lot, whether it be the North Meadow Tennis Club or the other large parking areas in town, that park 100 and 150 cars that are leaking residual oil that's coming off of the transmission or whatever. There has to be some kind of a plan, in my opinion, of a policy of what we're going to do for the violators and how that revenue stream is going to come into the system.
Do we have such a plan?
We do. There's a illicit discharge bylaw that was passed, I believe, 7 years ago or something.
We have a stormwater management bylaw.
There are 2 bylaws that, right?
We have that now.
Yeah, we do. The illicit discharge one, we do.
Did I hear another question? Is the formula include all the roadways? Was that one of your other
Yes, it
questions?
does.
Well, I'd like to ask
Yeah.
Brian.
No, it does not. We took basically 7,433, right now, that's the total single-family parcels in town. We took 5% of that, which is 362, and we analyzed those, and the impervious area ran from 1,300 square feet upwards of 19,000.
That includes single and double?
Yes, 3 units and less.
Up to 3 units.
Up to 3 units.
That's why yours will be higher, because you don't have 3 units, right? So you're on the lower end, but it's still a flat fee for
Flat fee for the residential.
for the 1 through 3,
Right.
yes.
But the residential comes up to 33 million, if I count 7,700 households on the average. If I take the commercial space, that comes up to 33 million also, 35 million square feet.
Yeah.
And if you divide that by 8,979, you come up with so many ERUs, equivalent residential units. Again, I'll state this, Mr. Chairman. I'm tending to vote in favor of the enterprise system, but I think we need to look at policy on the illicit violators. We need to tie in some linkage payments on development, because eventually that street and roadway within that development is going to be asked to be accepted by the town. And I think there should be standards in place with regard to development and drainage of those developments and as to where they go, because you're asking the homeowner, if they're not in complete compliance, they're going to get hit with a fee, a penalty. Those have not been explained out, in my opinion, fully yet. Now, the Board of Selectmen may have discussed it, all right? But in my mind, I don't think we have a full working plan for an enterprise system, as we did with the sewer system. The sewer and water, the water mostly was done by the town manager and a committee, a subcommittee with the sewer. And we worked it out as to how we were going to do certain things on fees and so forth, whether it be the initial fee for tie-in, et cetera. But to answer Mr. Gill's question, the Stormwater Management in the Clean Water Act of 1979, 1980, the Clean Water Act from the federal government has been updated many times and been amended. It's only since 2007, I believe it was, that they included waterways in stormwater management because of not only the flooding that's taken place because of climate change, but also the residuals that come off the roadways and residential properties, the fertilizer and so forth, is affecting the waterways. And if you do as much reading as I have on this subject of clean water, there is a lot that we have to do here in town to mitigate our problems, but I'm not 100% sure that this EIU is the way to do it. And if the selectmen are going to work on that fee, I'd like to be part of discussion on that, because I think you need to look at it and analyze it as to what the federal government, EPA, is doing to this community, the state of Massachusetts, and the entire country. And I can only go back from experience in my gray hair. Chapter 766 was mandated by the federal government, which is an educational program and mandate for our public school system. They promised us that they would give us reimbursement under the 766 program, federal reimbursement, which they've cut back completely. And now pretty much the state and the communities are funding that program. So this is what my fear is with the EPA. And again, I'm not knocking environmentalists. I'm knocking up the mandating that's done. Now that I know when we started the sewer program, Mr. Chairman, the Clean Water Act, when we started the sewer program, funded $20 million to initially start our program in this town, so that we wouldn't have to borrow it. If we get into the general fund with a stormwater management, and I would, as a finance committee member, I would like to see that pretty much laid out along with a stormwater management plan, rather than have an enterprise system. But right now, because we don't have a plan in place and the town manager wants to put something in place by July 1st, 2020, there's no money that's going to get appropriated this year in this year's budget, other than the money, Brian, that's in your budget right now. 356, I think, was the number you gave me the other night. 356,000 for stormwater. It's certainly not enough. I know that. But again, something's got to happen, and we need to be fair and equitable with the violators that are violating it and with development in this town. And either tie in linkage payments or whatever, there has to be something done. And I know the planning board has to have a lot to say in this when you tie in linkage, but it needs to be done, because you can't keep coming back to the homeowner. As I said earlier, sitting with $7,000 counting the sewer and water in taxes, and we're going to see another $514 next year. Listen, folks, I'm retired. I live on an income of $56,000 in retirement, plus my investments. But like I said, the average person in town can't do that. The average homeowner can't do that. But you're going to hit them with additional fees. The cable fee, the cable enterprise system is another area
Excuse me.
they're getting hit with.
I'd like you to wrap it up if you have any more questions.
Well, like I said, there's people home listening.
I got you.
There's been some suggestions early on about this finance committee doesn't analyze things, when it comes to the tax rate.
I think you've made the point.
I'm not sure. I know what the town manager does. He listens, because I've sat down with him. He listens. Brian, I know you try your hardest, all right, to meet the demands of the town.
Yes.
But there has to be.
I'm glad you followed up like that.
There has to be some critical thinking as to what we're doing.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Tom. Any other questions? If not, do I hear a motion?
Move to adopt. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? A reluctant aye over here. No opposed. Chair votes aye. Unanimous. Thank you, Brian. All right, Article 11.
Article 11 is an article asking town meeting to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire an easement for electricity and equipment for National Grid to install for the Regional Emergency Communication Center. National Grid needs that easement in order to finalize bringing permanent power to the site.
Any questions from the public? Any from the committee? Any motions?
Move to adopt?
I'll second that.
Motion is second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Unanimous. Number 12.
Article 12 is a similar article, but for the new elementary school. I'm not sure an easement will be needed by National Grid, but I want to be proactive and give the selectmen the authority in case one is needed for the new elementary school to grant that easement to National Grid for permanent electricity.
Okay, any questions from the public? Any from the committee? Any motions?
Move to adopt?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Number 13.
Article 13 is actually asking for the town meeting to give the selectmen authority to acquire an easement from CubeSmart, the CubeSmart property at 395 Woburn Street. This easement will allow the town to install and maintain drainage associated with Woburn Street.
Okay, any questions from the public? Any from the committee? Any motions?
Move to adopt?
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. 14.
Article 14 seeks authorization from town meeting to allow the selectmen to sell the parcels of land that are listed under Article 14. These are parcels that abutters have requested to purchase. The parcels will be sold in accordance with the town bylaw. And again, preference will be given to the abutters.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? Committee? Motions?
Move to adopt?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Unanimous.
I did have one quick question.
Oh.
Is this going to come across the town? I notice it's more on the south end for the most part.
These are the requests we received, and they are mostly because they're smaller parcel, but in that area is smaller, and people want to add to it.
Okay, thank you.
Number 15.
Article 15 is amending the town bylaw for penalties for dog violations. Currently, there is a change in Mass General laws that define the fine structure for dog bylaw violations. And this bylaw essentially brings our fines for dog violations to meet what the state statute is requiring. So it just brings us into compliance with the new state statute, or the change in the state statute.
Okay, any questions from the public? Committee? Motions?
Move to adopt?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? No, unanimous. Number 16.
Article 16 is a new bylaw being proposed for maintenance of vacant buildings and land. It's essentially a property maintenance bylaw to ensure that vacant land and vacant buildings in commercial areas or commercial properties are maintained and don't become run down and blighted and unsafe. This bylaw gives us a mechanism to enforce that they maintain a certain standard for upkeep. This bylaw does not regulate occupied buildings.
Thank you. Any questions from the public?
Did you say this was for commercial only?
Yeah, it is for commercial only.
So if there's a house that's empty in my neighborhood, there's no bylaw for that?
Right.
Okay.
I just had one question that I'm not against the article, I'm just wondering why we're having it. I mean, up to now, we've never had one, we've never had a bylaw covering vacant property.
Just,
Why is it any different than regular property? I read the article, but I mean, things don't happen in a vacuum. How come this is coming right now?
Well, it's something we've been thinking about for the last 3 or 4 years. We just haven't found something that we wanted to bring forward, and it just didn't rise to the level of priority. With some of the vacancies on Route 38 specifically, the Nissan dealership is a good example. The old Funland property is a good example. We've received a fair amount of complaints from residents. We now have a beautification committee trying to ensure that properties are maintained. So we're looking for a way to address those issues, and this seemed to be the best way.
Okay, so you have had some problems that you think need to be addressed.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we send letters to property owners. Some respond, some don't. But there are properties along Route 38 that we're both concerned. We're concerned not only for the way they look and the condition of the property, but we really believe that they're unsafe.
Okay. But the marijuana article's not going to pass, right? So.
I haven't gotten it yet. Let's not jump ahead.
How do you plan to police something like this? Does it end up being a tax lien at certain points, or?
It's going to be fines.
Right, but would it become a tax lien if they ever tried to sell it?
If they hadn't paid their fines, it could be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I meant,
Yep.
yeah.
Any other questions? Any motions?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. 17.
So Article 17 and 18, I'll speak together. Article 17 and 18 address marijuana establishments, that recreational marijuana establishments for cultivation, independent testing, and manufacturing. The town meeting adopted a general bylaw and a zoning bylaw to prevent those establishments or uses within the community. But when they adopted the bylaws, they also, what was included was a provision that the bylaw would expire on December 31st of 2019, which meant that the restriction on the use would expire. And after December 31st of 2019, those uses would be allowed in the community. The idea behind it was to give us time to go to the local election with a non-binding referendum to see if the residents of this community wanted to allow for recreational marijuana cultivators, testing laboratories, and manufacturers. Because the belief was when the referendum question statewide was brought forward, it wasn't clear. So we did that, and the residents of this community voted to ban those uses, so to ensure that those uses are not allowed. So this article simply brings a general bylaw, the general bylaw and the zoning bylaw articles forward to take out the sunset provision, so to speak. And these uses will be banned permanently.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? From the committee? Any motions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make 2 motions. Move to adopt Article 17, move to adopt Article 18.
Second,
On both?
yes.
Okay, all in favor? Sorry, I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
1 opposed. So what's that, 5-1 on both?
Yes.
Article, what are we on, 19?
Do you want to take this?
Good evening. So Article 19 is a follow-up to Article 36 that was at the annual town meeting. It was a citizen's petition, and in that petition, it was just written to change lots 103-102 and 102-16 to heavy industrial 1 uses. And the Attorney General's review of the article informed us, the town of Tewksbury, that we actually needed to amend the zoning map itself. So they mentioned in that review that at a subsequent town meeting, you should come back to town meeting to amend the map, and that's what this article does.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? Questions from the committee? Any motions?
Motion to adopt.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, we already talked about Article 20. And Article
21 is being withdrawn by
Article 21 is being withdrawn. I think that might do it.
Mr. Chairman, I move to
Sorry?
Motion to adjourn?
Before you,
Oh.
is there a time sheet? Melissa?
Yes, I don't have it.
Do you know what?
Can we do that on Tuesday?
public hearing and then,
Close the public hearing and we'll discuss it.
Okay, so
Get it.
Motion to adjourn.
to close the public hearing?
Close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? All right. Other business.
Just
Timesheet.
There was a timesheet for the clerk, if you can authorize me to sign it.
Sent you the email, right?
Yes.
Have it printed though?
Do we want to wait till Tuesday before,
We can vote
It's up
on
to
it
you.
without it.
okay, could we vote on it now?
You're taking it on this one.
I'd like to submit the payroll for Tuesday.
Okay, so let's take a vote on the timesheet. Any motions?
I'll second it.
Oh, any motions?
It's,
Motion.
Did he already motion? You already motioned to approve, Dave?
the amount is for
Oh, I thought you just said a motion.
$498.15 for 23 hours.
Are there any motions?
I'll move.
How do I do that? Just say yes, you can sign it?
I'll motion to approve, also allowing the town manager to sign on the chairman's behalf.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Good. We'll do, should we do the meeting minutes? You had like 3 or 4. I never had a chance to review them, so maybe we do those if we have time on Tuesday. All right, any final thoughts or motions?
Move to close Finance Committee.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Chair votes aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you, everyone.